welcome to another audio-visual extravaganza on the CompuTrainer. I'm just selecting my turbo warm-up file here, which will warm up the resistance unit and the tyre before we start the main session. So I've started this 10-minute section of my training now. We're just rolling along at 100 watts, 125 watts now. You can see the green figures at the bottom left-hand part of the screen. And now we're up to 175 watts, which is where we're going to sit for 8 minutes, just whilst everything gets properly warmed up. And this will ensure that all the power figures for the session to follow will be accurate. If you don't go through this process, you will not get accurate information out of your CompuTrainer, or probably the majority of all turbos, I would think. So we're up to the 8-minute mark now, so just a couple of minutes to go, and what I do then is recalibrate the CompuTrainer to make sure it's accurate once it's warmed up, and then we'll start the session properly. So we've saved that file. I'm now recalibrating the turbo, selecting the session, and we'll be starting in just a moment. Okay, we're off. There's all the loads and heart rate and cadence coming up. So we're starting this 2x20 sweet spot session at 175 watts. This is all part of the warm-up, and that's just clicking up now to 225 watts. It'll then go up to 250 watts, as you can see in the progress bar at the top of the screen. We're now up to 250 watts. It then drops back to 175 before the main part of the session starts, when the load goes up to 270 watts for the first 20 minutes. So just easing back now to 175, have a drink, get ready for the main part of the effort. So we're just about to go up to 270 watts, and we're on that load now. The first 5 minutes are generally the most uncomfortable, because you do go into an oxygen debt, because I have adopted the practice of putting the load on suddenly, because that replicates what happens out on the road. People don't sort of turn around to you and say, are you ready to speed up a bit? They just put the hammer down and off they go. And you have to be able to respond to that. So I think it's good practice in training to replicate that where you can. Obviously you want to warm up properly, but when it comes to suddenly putting in an effort, then I think it should be a question of the load being put on, and then trying to deal with it. Some would disagree with that, but it's a free country. We all have our own views. So we're about halfway through that first 20 minutes now, and then there'll be a 5-minute pause when the load will drop back down to 175 watts. Have a bit of a rest before starting again with the second 20-minute effort. This sort of training has a very positive effect on your threshold. It slowly pushes it up, but it's the sort of training you have to do regularly and you have to keep at. And it's important not to go up into it's quite easy to spend a lot of this sort of session up at sort of threshold, which isn't really at all what this session's about. So we're just coming to the end of that 20-minute session now. Time for a pause and a drink. Stretch the legs. See me standing up there. The cadence drops down. No, just a little bit of recovery there. So yes, I think it's important to make sure that these sessions are done at the sweet spot in terms of load or wattage, whatever you prefer to call it. Otherwise you end up doing threshold sessions when you're not supposed to be, and you end up getting more and more tired and digging a big hole for yourself. So the load is now back at 270 as we've started the second effort. It's quite strange really that I not infrequently find that the second effort is actually a little bit more comfortable than the first, because you find that your physiology is by this time geared up to the work. It's not such a shock to it, and so once you start the second effort, get over the initial oxygen debt, you can sometimes, certainly for the mid 10 minutes or so, feel reasonably comfortable. See, my heart rate now has crept up to about 156, 158 beats a minute, which is fine. That's below my threshold heart rate, but certainly above my sort of tempo heart rate, so I'm working at about the right level, both in terms of my heart rate and also in terms of the percentage of my functional threshold power that I want to be working at, which the sweet spot is about, if memory serves correctly, is about 88 to 94% of FTP. So we've got about 5 minutes now of this 20-minute effort left. So legs will be starting to feel a bit tired now. Heart rate's gone up to just over 160. The old friend, the cardiac drift. It'd be nice if it stayed completely flat, but it certainly doesn't for me at these sorts of levels of effort. So we're coming to the end of that. So the work is now done for this session. We've now got a 5-minute cool down period. A couple of high cadence spins during that just to loosen the legs off. But we're pretty much there now in terms of this session. So I hope that that's been of some interest to you. I'll try and put up a few others of these sessions, and you can pop in and have a look. See what you think. I'm saving that file. Then we just have a look at the overview of that session. I'll just put that up briefly on the screen. There it is. And you see the pale pinkish line in the middle there showing the slow creep up in the heart rate, but it's not going up disastrously at all, so that's fine. So that's the end of that session. Thanks for dropping by.